get us a quick update of what you saw in the first couple of days of spring practice there for Georgia football, what we can expect the rest of the way. What are going to be the big storylines for spring practice?
Well, Georgia started Monday, and they will actually have 4 practices this week. They didn't have one today, so it was just kind of an odd week. But I think the number one thing at Georgia is, well, first of all, there's not a lot of question marks coming in, but they'd like to settle down the right tackle spot. I think they would like that to be Keontae Tripp, who is from Atlanta. And then secondly, just a matter of getting some younger guys who played a lot last year ready to start. And I think Georgia returns like 17 or 18 starters. So that's a lot. And I think the biggest question mark will be, how will the offensive line deal with right tackle? And then who's going to start at center? Is it really going to be Chris Davis, who started a lot of games at guard this past year, or is someone else going to get in there and start for them? And we'll see. It's an intriguing question. There's not a lot of huge question marks. I think the biggest spot Georgia has to replace is probably place kicker.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, that's Brandon Kutu that had left after last year, and that's a spot that not many folks you really think about coming into a season, but you tend to take for granted when you have a guy that was that good for a number of years,
right,
as he was. A lot of fans take those positions for granted, but you're right, that could be a big spot for them. Talk about that a little more.
Well, Georgia has always had good place kickers for seemingly forever, definitely since Mark WRIX's been there. But Kutu, when he's gone now, so it's going to be Blair Walsh, who's from Miami, Florida, really Fort Lauderdale. It's going to be Blair's show, and Blair's got an extremely powerful leg. I think it's one thing to do it in high school. It's another thing to do it with 90,000 people screaming at you. And Kutu only had a couple of game-winning kicks, but he had so many kicks that put Georgia in position where they didn't have to have game-winning kicks that he was extremely valuable. And I think, Coach Rick would say to you that our offense changes when we don't have Brandon Kutu, because that happened a couple of times in his career. Kutu he actually did get injured, and that hurt Georgia. So we'll see where Blair Walsh comes in. He couldn't come in early. His high school doesn't allow that sort of thing. It's not a public high school, and it's going to be Blair's show, and we'll see what Blair can do when that happens.
Absolutely, and I know since the last time we talked, several publications have put out sort of a pre-spring top 25 of their college football programs. Dennis Dodd of CBS Sportsline being no exception. He placed the Georgia Bulldogs at number 1. I wanted to kind of get the feeling of what it's like in the program, understanding the fact that they are going to be the hunted, not necessarily the hunter coming into this season. They clearly have the bullseye on their back. How has Rick and the coaching staff responded in trying to get the team ready for a season of playing with that bullseye on their back?
Well, it's not necessarily new that Georgia is the quote unquote. I guess the hunted is the best way to put it. I don't think that's necessarily new, but I do think it's new that they are going to be a top 3, top 5 team in the country. That's not something they've dealt with going into a season that I can remember. Now they've worked their way up very, very, very high, but they've not started the season. Now they've started the season with a lot of expectations before. Are things different than they were last year? A little, because these guys are expecting to play for the national championship. I mean, they said it 10 minutes after the game with Kentucky where they seemed so bored they couldn't wait to leave. I mean, they were so uninterested in that game because they were winning by 30 points or whatever it was. They just seemed unchallenged, and I think that they know they're good. They are good. I mean, they are. I mean, I don't know that they're the number 1 team in the country, but I don't know who you can say is the number 1 team in the country. And Georgia, truthfully, they've got a brutal schedule, and Florida's going to be a top 5 team too. So it's not like they're not going to have. They're going to have difficult contests, and it's going to be from the same, the usual suspects. It's going to be from your Floridas and Tennessees and Auburn. And, Alabama comes to town, LSU, and of course they got to go to South Carolina. So it's not like I mean, I know that your radio station's in South Carolina, and the madness that was circling when South Carolina was the number 6 team in the country, that doesn't really happen in Georgia. It's a little bit different. It's this year they knew coming in, almost no matter what they did, that they were going to be considered a big deal team in 2008.